Hello, everybody, and welcome to a post-Christmas edition of the Friday Football Show. Tim Benz and Mike DeCourcy with you. We are brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar on the North Shore. Meet me at Mike's. They've got over 80 rotating taps, 500 available craft beers, just across the street from PNC Park at the base of the Clemente Bridge. Get yourself a steak and a stone. Great place to go. After you spend all this time with your family on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, maybe you want to get out with the boys, maybe you want to get out and have some fun and watch some games. You've got plenty of opportunity to do that. College basketball, college football, pro football, all that going on. Meet me at Mike's. We are getting ready for Steelers and Browns on Sunday, or Mike DeCourcy, maybe to the point, getting ready for Ravens and Packers tomorrow. Yes. Mike Tomlin was not aware this was a Saturday game, apparently. I don't know if you heard his press conference.
I did hear that, yes.
Blissfully unaware that this game was taking place. And I think that's where I want to start our show today, our 30,000-foot big picture view, the state of the Steelers heading into game day, our view from Mount Washington. And, Mike, I'm going to keep it simple, and that is the Steelers should keep it simple. Don't outthink yourself. If you're in a position where the game doesn't matter, and you have the AFC North sewn up because the Packers have beaten the Ravens, then as far as I'm concerned, you're doing yourself a disservice if you play everybody, especially the quarterback for 4 quarters against the Browns with that banged-up offensive line in front of them.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable thing, but the thing that and obviously this is all suppositional because we don't know what will happen Saturday night between Green Bay and Baltimore. But if indeed it is an empty game, the problem is that then you have 2 empty games. Right. One is a breather. 2 is an opportunity to get stale. And so that becomes a difficult managing decision for Mike Tomlin and his staff. How do we handle this? And they don't have much leeway in terms of, well, we're like right now, that game means everything. The game, as we sit, the Browns game means everything to the Steelers. And by the time they kick the ball, it may mean nothing. I mean, that's a difficult position to be in. And so I think that you are right that if you're out in front or comfortable with how you've played or whatever circumstance you might be entering the midway through the third or the fourth quarter, you might say to yourself, well, he doesn't need to take every snap. But it is a challenge to adopt a mentality that quickly that the game especially the part that the game doesn't matter at all. The game meaning everything they're used to. It's what they are accustomed to. And that's what they go for every week, even back in September. But the instant, it could be midnight on Saturday night when they discover that the game Sunday means nothing.
Yeah, game plan wise, that part is already taken care of. And I'm like you in the sense that I don't think sitting everybody for 2 straight weeks would be wise. I don't. Now they can manage that. They can manipulate that. They can, get Aaron Rodgers with his banged up left wrist out of there a lot quicker than they normally would. What with that offensive line in front of them going through a lot of injuries and Myles Garrett on the other side on the defensive line. I mean, that's something you have to consider going into this game, and then kind of play it like, first half of a preseason game or something next week against Baltimore. You could do that. So like to your point, you don't get stale. When quite frankly, I think they're figuring some things out with the offense right now. They've actually done some different things in recent weeks. They've actually found the middle of the field. They've actually found some deep shot opportunities. They've gotten Jonnu Smith involved in ways that we thought we'd see a lot more frequently during the course of the season. So I don't want that to get stale, but I also don't want to put themselves at needless risk at times over these next 2 games. Now, that said, the counter to that is they don't have a lot of guys they can sit because they don't have a lot of guys they can play. I mean, like at wide receiver, at offensive line, at cornerback, at outside linebacker, they're already banged up in a lot of those places anyway, and they're sitting a lot of people to begin with.
Yeah, and that's where the problem begins. And the other part of it that I thought about is you mentioned all the things they're starting to discover. but now you got to get good at them. And you're not strictly going to get NFL good at them in a practice session that's very, and in a lot of cases is low to no contact. So that's the other part of these games, that if they turn out to both be meaningless, that you can use those games to feel like, gain some confidence, feel like you understand how you want to run this particular play, so that when you get to whomever it might be coming into Acrisure, and again, that's all. I'm not projecting that these games aren't going to matter, but we're talking about if they don't matter, how you handle it. And I do think you have. I just don't. I don't see any way around using, especially the Cleveland game, but maybe even the Baltimore game, some time to try to get better at what you're doing well. We all remember, I think it was the 2008 season when the Steelers went down to Tennessee for a meaningless game, and Mike Tomlin insisted on playing Ben in that game, and he got dinged, and it was like, oh my goodness. And this isn't like that, because this team isn't great. That team was clearly great. It had a lot of things that it didn't do great, but the team as a whole was legitimately great, and that's part of why they ended up winning the Super Bowl. This team isn't yet, and whether it's out there or not, I don't know, but I know that they're getting closer to it, and I don't think they'll get closer still if they are just taking the next 2 weeks as mere exhibitions.
How about you? What do you want to bring up for your big picture view? Something DK related?
Yeah, I mean, to me, as I look at this, my question is simple. Did DK cost the Steelers nothing or everything? Because both of those are still in play as we sit here this morning. It could mean nothing, really, other than the things we just discussed, the chance to get better if indeed Green Bay goes out and wins Saturday night. Or it could mean everything if the Steelers go into Cleveland on Sunday afternoon and have to win the game, and they are down not only their only prime receiver, their only proven prime receiver in DK Metcalf for the actions that he took on Sunday, but also potentially Austin, who hasn't practiced as of yet this week. So it could really be costly. And I don't appreciate fans being idiots. I don't appreciate that. It's not what I go to games for. And it's not what I go to game. I don't want to be around those people either. But at the same time, if DK is distracted or bothered by something that a particular fan is doing or saying, there's a very simple solution. There are Steelers personnel on the sidelines, and you go to them and say, that guy in the blue wig, he's saying such and such, can we do anything about it? And then that person on the Steelers staff goes to Lions security and said, can you move that guy because he's saying things that are untoward, or whatever it might be? I mean, because we don't know what was said. We only know what has been alleged, but it's clearly something that was distracting to him. And there are other avenues to dealing with it, even beyond just ignoring it. There are ways to deal with it that are within the boundaries of good taste and the NFL's rules that he could have handled it. And he chose the confrontation. And now he's going to miss the final 2 games of the regular season. Whether they're valuable or not, or whether they're essential or not, they're still valuable because things that he could have done to continue to get better toward being capable in the postseason. You want to talk about stale? How about 2 weeks you can't play? That's stale.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it kind of dovetails into the other part of the conversation, which is if you're not going to have DK anyway, and so much of your passing game goes through him, and everything that we've heard about like Thielen and MVS and all these guys that have been woven into the mix about what they truly do is they run defensive backs away from coverage on Metcalf. If that's their biggest plus, and Metcalf isn't there, then yeah, you might as well rest Rodgers. Like it just kind of feeds into, if you play him, then what are you playing him for if the main cog in your passing game isn't there? Now, they can certainly work on the run game. There's certainly elements, I suppose, they can play the parts of their passing tree or their even their offense in general that don't include Metcalf. You could work on those, but we're beating a dead horse at this point. But man, it is a different kettle of fish to be in a situation. In fact, this one comes from Dylan, who says this. You rest your players because to be able to get a bye as a fourth seed is unprecedented. It is weird that you're going to be the fourth seed and you're going to be in locked-in territory potentially for 2 weeks before your game. It is strange. It's not like you're playing for the one seed in the bye here and you're talking about the 2-week thing. You're talking about it potentially as the 4 seed. That is odd.
It is really different. There's no question. It usually, when it is like that, it comes down to your division being so poor that you're going to win it at 8 and 9 or something like that. And this isn't really the case. I mean, the Steelers could still put up a really impressive record if they were to win the final 2 games. 11-6 would be a pretty impressive record, and I think they'd like to do that. I don't think they're going to. I don't think they're going to take any unnecessary chances to do that if there are unnecessary chances to be taken. But I think that it's very interesting that they really, I mean, there's very little leeway for them to move up in the seed list. And we don't even know whether there's reward in it because we don't know who the opposite team would be under the various seeding scenarios.
Yeah. And the Packers, for instance, they can still win the division. They have something to play for. The Bears at 11-4, Packers 9-5-1. So they can still win the division. They've got something to play for, and their quarterbacks are both banged up. Although,
yes,
what Love practiced and Willis said that he could play if Love can't.
Yeah, Willis did practice a limited yesterday. I don't like for quarterbacks. I don't know what limited means because it's already pretty limited, right, Tim?
They can't get hit or anything.
So. Yeah, so I don't know exactly, but he did. They both were on the field yesterday. We don't know if Love will escape concussion protocol, and the fact that they're playing Saturday, while it does offer the opportunity for the Steelers to not have to care on Sunday, it may ultimately cost them Love being able to go. We don't know for sure, but Willis played really well in that Chicago game. He did not cost them that game. He gave them a chance to win.
Yeah, and one thing, Mike Tomlin's big thing now is that he hates it when people ask him about confidence. Well, one thing that gives me confidence about where they sit right now is I may be even more confident in the Ravens not getting the job done than Pittsburgh getting the job done. After what I saw last week and the stupidity with which John Harbaugh handled that game down the stretch, having Henry on the sideline, there's nothing that I feel vibes-wise coming from Baltimore that makes me think that those guys are going to, rally the troops, beat Green Bay, and then beat Pittsburgh if the season is in the balance. I don't see that coming from Baltimore. Do you?
Well, I mean, let's not forget that they were in the game and in control of the game, honestly, against New England, which is now trending toward the 1 or the 2 seed in the AFC. So there is that, and it was a home game. I'll be very curious to see what kind of effort the Packers put out. I would rather Detroit had kept a little pressure on them from the rear by not completely and totally tanking on Christmas night. Excuse me. I would have preferred that, but I still think that Green Bay has to show that they're legit, and I think there's some pressure externally on the Packers coaching staff to start to look like they have some clue of what they're doing. Because honestly, as I mentioned, Malik Willis played really well on Saturday night, and it was coaching that I thought that started the undoing. It wasn't all of it. I mean, obviously, you still got to field an onside kick and all of that. But they made some really questionable coaching decisions in high leverage situations that could have put the game well in their control, and they failed. And it was mostly failure due to coaching.
Yeah, and I know the Steelers right now, they're two of their best wins. They're the Patriots' victory in Week 3 now looks like their best win of the season, but 2 of their better wins of the year, the Colts and the Lions, it looks like neither of those teams are going to make the playoffs now.
Right. And that's true. But sometimes, I had people talk to me about that after I wrote a column for the SN Pittsburgh site this week. I had somebody say, well, they're not beating any playoff teams. I'm like, yeah, but the teams aren't in the playoffs because they beat them. I mean, they beat Baltimore, so they're out of the playoff picture at the moment. They beat Detroit. They knocked them down the drain. The
Colts started the Colts slide. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So all of that adds up. I mean, how often are you going to beat playoff teams? Sometimes, yeah, but a lot of times the reason they're not in the playoffs is because you defeated them.
So like I said earlier in the season, Mike, you need quad one wins in the NFL. You need quad one wins. All right, let's get to our keys to victory. We'll give you an offensive key, a defensive key, and a bonus key to look out for. My offensive key is just overload on Garrett no matter what, especially for the reasons that we talked about before. You've still got a quarterback that's healing from an injury. You've got a young offensive tackle as well as he has played. You know, this is a whole different matter playing against Garrett, although he did see Hutchinson, who's quite good from Detroit last week sometimes. I thought it was ironic. You know, probably the worst rep that he's had was as soon as Romo and Nance were talking about how great Dylan Cook was playing, Hutchinson blew by him for a sack. But, you know, that might have been more on Gainwell than anything, to be honest with you. He was a little slow getting over there for the chip. But it just, optically, it didn't look great. But he's been really good since he got in there. You know, Garrett's going to get there at one point. Garrett's going to get the record at some point, and it's most likely going to happen this week. Just don't let him wreck the game as he has so frequently done when Pittsburgh has gone up to play Cleveland. He is a different animal when you see him in Cleveland against the Steelers than when he comes here. He's like a night and day different guy, and I don't think you want to wreck Cook's confidence for as much as it has been built up the way he has been playing by having himself eaten alive by the best in the game potentially.
Yeah, I'm in the same area. My was keep the pass pro from becoming a con. That's the whole thing for the Steelers this weekend. They rank 9th in sacks allowed. I mean, in terms of not the most sacks allowed, but in the way the defensive stats read in the NFL, it's always tricky. But they are the 9th best at keeping you from sacking their guy. That's pretty impressive, and they don't get a lot of credit for that. And I know that some of that is Aaron Rodgers gets rid of the ball, and it doesn't take any unnecessary chances, and he'll throw the ball at a teammate's feet if it looks like he's going to be in trouble. But there are other guys out there who avoid sacks by running away from it because they're great athletes, Lamar or somebody like that, or can avoid sacks. And they're still getting taken down. And so I think that the Steelers offensive line deserves some more credit for that. And they have one of their more significant challenges on Sunday when they have to deal with the Cleveland Myles Garrett. The Pittsburgh Myles Garrett never seems to turn out all that scary, but the one that's patrolling the lake, even if he doesn't have a helmet in his hands, can do a lot of damage.
Well, he can do more damage when he's got your helmet in his hands. That's when he can be most damaging. Just ask Mason Rudolph. What you want to stick with your defensive key, Mike? Why don't you go next?
Yeah, the Steelers have a great track record of dealing with rookie quarterbacks. I know it goes all the way back to Dick LeBeau. Just in the last 2 years, Dylan Gabriel for the Browns at the time, he was their starting quarterback. They wrecked him. They did a really nice job on Bo Nix last year for Denver. When they face rookie quarterbacks, they've done really well. And some of that comes from the pressure schemes that they're able to apply. And I think that's something that's really important. Make sure Shedeur Sanders looks like a rookie. 6 TDs and 8 INTs in 5 starts. Was sacked 5 times when the Bears blew them off the field a couple of weeks ago. I know the Buffalo game gives you pause because they were very competitive in that game. But it hasn't been that long since it's been 2 weeks since the Bears absolutely humiliated Cleveland. So you've got to go in there and put that level of pressure on Shedeur Sanders. And I think that can really make a difference for the Steelers this week.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the Sanders side of things and just make the point to change things up in the second half. Get to halftime and then give Sanders a little something different to look at in the second half. I was talking to Matt Williamson a little bit about this, who I do my show with on Fox Sports Pittsburgh 970 during the week. And he was, cooking up some numbers and was kind of looking at some film about, where Sanders might struggle if the other team makes some in-game adjustments. And I think that's incumbent on the Steelers to make him think and make him process quickly, show him X and give him Y kind of deal. Maybe force him to feel a little robotic in there. Make him feel like he might have his feet underneath him in the first half, and then give him a change up in the second half. And that kind of dovetails with your point about rookie quarterbacks. It's not just a Shedeur thing; it's all rookie quarterbacks. The minute that you start to feel comfortable in the National Football League, you should feel uncomfortable, and that should be incumbent on the other team to make you feel uncomfortable. And hopefully, the Steelers go along with that line of thought. My bonus key is going to be use the tight ends because you have to. The wide receiver ranks are so thin right now with the DK suspension, and to whatever extent Austin Isner is not available right now going into this game with the hamstring injury. So they've gotten better in the last couple of weeks of using the tight ends, particularly like we talked about how they're using Jonnu Smith out of the backfield. They're handing him the ball. They're jet sweeping him. They're not really quality targets per se, but they're making a little bit more out of Freiermuth. So I like what I'm seeing. We're starting to see the tight end oriented offense with all these tight ends that we were led to believe.
Yeah, they did use one of those like flare passes to the left side where he was left alone because they drew the coverage away in the first half, and it was a huge conversion, and it showed what they can accomplish if they use him. It was a huge conversion that he got. He caught about a 4-yard, 5-yard pass, and I think it was a 3rd and 10 at that point, and he converted the other 5 yards easily because there was no one near him until he got to the sideline. So he caught a couple of passes like that were big conversions. They have found other uses for Jonnu, but they still haven't been able to find a way to get him into the passing game effectively. And then Darnell continues to be an effective target. A little bit disappointing to see him fumble the football in a red zone situation. They ultimately made up for that in different ways. But at least I totally agree with you. They need to use those guys more, and it'd be nice to see Jonnu used more as a receiver than just that guy that, oh, wow, he can run the ball too. The dream version of Cordero Patterson, right?
Yeah, well, actually, it is really, honestly. Yeah. That's kind of. I've gotten that vibe in recent weeks of, okay, this is what he was hunting for when they kept Cordero Patterson around. Yeah. But this guy's more athletic, a little bit more live and spry than Cordero was by the end of his career,
right?
With Pittsburgh, which, by the way, is he still part of the Steelers? Is he still on the roster? Is he still on the payroll? Is he still in the locker room? He very well may be. What was your bonus key, Mike?
Yeah, it's connected to what I talked about before about getting pressure on Shedeur, and that is like I got no complaints about how Jack Sawyer played on Sunday night. He was fantastic. But he's not Nick Herbig in terms of putting pressure on the quarterback. So be nice with TJ still likely to be out. It'd be nice to be able to get Herbig out there. I think Mike Tomlin is optimistic about him playing, and he has been out on the field in practice each of the last 2 days. So it'd be nice to have him there to bother Sanders and to continue to put that pressure on the rookie QB.
Okay, let's get to our on the other sideline aspect of our show. This is where we always segue into how the other team is viewing this game against the Steelers. Look at so much of this from a Steelers perspective. What are the other guys thinking going into this one? And why don't you start here, Mike?
Yeah, for me, Myles Garrett, how much attention will he be paying to the game? And how much will he be paying to breaking that sack record? Now, some of that will come relative to how quickly he may or may not break it. But like if he got the Aiden Hutchinson sack on the first or second play of the game and he breaks the record, then my look at the Browns won't really be that germane. But if it takes him a little while, how much will he be obsessing about that? And can you use that against him in a way? Can you
run right at him, run right by him, you're saying?
Exactly. Can you find ways to get him thinking about things other than him sacking the QB and get him distracted that way? There aren't a ton of things that don't favor the Steelers in this game. I mean, they lost their terrific rookie running back. They're down to their literal fourth quarterback at the start of training camp. So there are lots of things that on paper favor the Steelers, but Myles Garrett still is out there and still a concern.
There are still so many scenarios that exist that could get Mason Rudolph in this game and have Garrett sacking him for the record. And I just, poor Mason. That's it. Always comes down. How is Mason Rudolph going to get screwed on this one? Whenever something happens that's Cleveland related, how is Mason Rudolph going to get screwed on this one? And it feels like, whether he's starting or not, or maybe the Steelers have a lead late and he hasn't gotten it yet, or that
would be something.
And then wants to put an exclamation point on it. I don't know, but it could come down to Mason Rudolph being back there and being the one that gets sacked for the Myles Garrett record.
What could be a better punctuation mark to Myles Garrett's sack record than it be a backup quarterback in what is in a meaningless game that is now even more meaningless because the Steelers are up 2 touchdowns or whatever.
All right. Yeah.
And then he gets a sack. That would be poetic.
My view, this is sort of a bigger picture thing for Cleveland. We always do that to start the show from a Steelers end of things, but for Cleveland, are your coach and quarterback going to work together or not? Like that's one thing that I want to see if I'm looking at this from the Cleveland lens over the last couple of weeks. Like they said, they're not going to bother activating Watson. Like if this is going to be Shadur's show and this is going to be Stefanski's show, how are they going to work together? That's one thing I want to see if I'm looking at this from a Cleveland perspective. And I don't know how you feel about this, Mike, but there's been so much bluster around every coach in the AFC North. Like how is the coaching deck going to be shaken up in the AFC North? Like, is Zach Taylor going to be gone? And would the Bengals hire Stefanski to be their coach? How is that going to go? Is Taylor going to wind up somewhere else in the AFC North as a coordinator? Like that could happen.
Yes.
I'm very interested to see how the AFC North dice gets rolled here in the offseason with the coaches because, it went from fire Tomlin to maybe he's the only guy who's back again next year. Of course, he was always going to be back, even though we were talking about it, people were chanting it. He was never going to go anywhere.
No.
But everybody else feels like it's up for grabs. It's up for debate, especially Harbaugh after last week. I mean, things really got ratcheted up around him. There was some sort of ancillary talk about Harbaugh when things started to heat up about Tomlin. Everybody sort of looked at Harbaugh and said, well, they're the same guy. Like they got the same track record. They got the only difference is that Harbaugh's won a couple of playoff games here in recent memory as opposed to Tomlin. So, but now with the way things have just declined in Baltimore, there's a lot of focus on how he handled that game and how he's handled this season that there's some heat on him individually too.
That's absolutely true. I still don't think that it's the wise move. I mean, for Baltimore in similar fashion to how I feel about the Steelers and Tomlin, I think that John has some weaknesses. They all do, right? We've talked about Mike Tomlin's weaknesses relative to his coaching staff. And in Harbaugh's case, it's the need to prove every time he gets the opportunity that he's the smartest guy out there. And we've seen him take risks that were there were Steelers, one of the Steelers games where he went for it on a 4th down, where it was clearly not to play it. It's been a couple of years now. I can't remember the exact one, but we've seen him try to be the smartest guy in the room on too many occasions, and we could look at the whole use of Henry last week as more of that, trying to be the smartest guy in the room. It's sort of similar to when Pete Carroll didn't call for the dive play with Marshawn Lynch in the Super Bowl. The obvious play is often the smart play. And the obvious play for the Ravens at that point was run Henry a couple of times. And if he got nowhere, then you got to do something else. But run him a couple of times and make the Patriots stop him. And instead, they just went back to their usual rotation, and it cost them dearly.
All right, let's get to our stat pack, our stat of the week, the most telling stat heading into this game. Mike, what's yours?
Yeah, mine is 32 or 1. And again, it goes back to what I talked about when you look at defensive stats. Are they 32nd in points allowed from turnovers, or are they first? Because 32nd means they're the worst, and that's exactly what they are. But they also allow the most points from turnovers, so that kind of means they're first. But the whole point is that they've allowed 104 points off of turnovers in this season. And it's the biggest reason why, even though statistically, from a yard standpoint, they're number 2 in total yards allowed in terms of, like, from the defensive standpoint. They allow fewer yards than all but one other team in the league. But they're only 20th in scoring D, which is the most important factor, because I mean, there are ways that you can allow a lot of yards and still not give up points if you're a bend but don't break and you're giving up a lot of threes. But they're only 20th in the league in scoring defense, even though they're number 2 in total yards allowed, and it mostly comes down to their offense putting them in terrible positions with turnovers and them not being able to get off the field in those circumstances often enough. So Steelers have to be opportunistic in this game.
I think you brought up a little bit of what I wanted to get to for my stat when you talked about sack rate or sack differential. If you look at the differential right now, the Browns are +6 in sack differential. Pittsburgh is at +14. And that's surprising to me in the sense that you would kind of think that the Browns would have a higher number than that, given what Myles Garrett's doing individually, but they don't get a lot from other people besides Garrett in the pass rush department, A. And then B, you got to look at like Gabriel and the game that he played against Pittsburgh here in Pittsburgh. Maybe the processing for Shadur Sanders and holding on to the ball too long, like the amount of sacks that they've given up in the other direction to keep that number relatively modest on the positive end for them says a lot. And like you illuminated earlier, Pittsburgh at +14, you would think with some of the offensive line concerns that we had earlier in the season and some of the injuries that they've had and the complaints that we had about Broderick Jones to start the year, that number would be worse. Now, granted, that +14 is largely about Aaron Rodgers and what he does to get rid of the ball. I mean, he's his own best pass protection in a lot of ways, but still, those numbers seem noteworthy to me between these two teams. That did jump out at me. Also want just to get to a couple stats from the Lions game that just blew my mind. First of all, them being +215 in the run game department just was astonishing to me, given the ability for Detroit to run the ball, the inconsistency of the Steelers' rush defense, and then on top of that, the fact that the Steelers aren't the best running team in the world. I think they were 30th coming in to that game. Then they put up 215, and when they needed big runs, they got them. The alleyways were huge for Warren to run through. They still get plenty from Kenneth Gainwell when they hand him the ball, let alone when they throw it to him. The run game differential in that Lions game was stunning to me last week. And the other stat, and this one, I couldn't believe it. I think the total was 23 plays. I think it was 23 plays that were run inside the 20 in the 2 drives that ended up going dry for Detroit. Like that goal line stand that Pittsburgh had early in the game against Detroit.
Right.
Goal line stand that they had at the end of the game against Detroit. The Lions ran, I think it was 23 plays in the red zone alone in those 2 drives. And like, that's a lot of snaps to come away with absolutely no points. That's unbelievable.
Yes. Well, there were a lot of remarkable things about Sunday's game, and the way that last play was officiated was probably at the top of the list. They got the call right and yet somehow managed to get everything else on that play wrong, from the lateral, which was absurd because he'd been driven back 5 yards, to the announcement of the penalty, which should have been as simple, Tim, as offensive pass interference. Detroit, by rule, there is no further play. The game is over. We're out of here. That should have been it. And instead,
I don't have a problem with how the ref did it, because you're supposed to say what the result of the play is first. When you're a ref, you're supposed to say what the result of the play is. The result of the play, as they allowed it to continue, was a touchdown. So for him to say the result of the play is a touchdown,
they don't do that. They don't do that in any other portion of the field. Like if you complete a first down pass, a 25-yard pass, but there's holding on the offensive tackle, they don't say the result of the play is a first down. No, they say holding offensive tackle number 75, and we march him back 10 yards.
Yeah, but they do a lot of things differently in the end zone. We talked about that in Baltimore after the likely play, right? I mean, the end zone changes a lot of things, but regardless, the fact that they went so long without blowing a whistle, the fact that no one said offensive pass interference, they didn't signal that first before they reviewed anything else.
Right.
The biggest problem that I've got from the way that game went, specifically the play at the end, was how it was adjudicated. And the failure to blow a whistle. They don't blow whistles anymore. They don't end plays.
And the problem with that is if Joey Porter and Ramsey throw him down like violently, then they're risking a 15-yard penalty. They're doing what they've been trained to do. Control the ball carrier, make sure he's wrapped, make sure you drive him back, plays over. And whoever was in charge of the whistle there should have whistled that play dead.
Yeah, and the biggest sin about it was, okay, let's say there wasn't a pass interference flag or they decide to pick it up or whatever after they get told in their ear what to do.
Right.
They did blow a whistle, but they blew it when Jared Goff was in midair. Like when he was jumping across the goal line was the first time I heard a whistle on that play. Go back and watch it. If it's earlier, tell me, show me. I haven't had anybody show me or tell me that yet. But to blow the whistle there, what point is it at that? He's already pitched the ball. Like, why are you blowing it dead when you've got the ball carrier running the ball and going across the end zone? Where is it to blow dead at that point? You've let it continue this long. They are just petrified by fear to end a play because they don't want to be the ones that are wrong. They don't want to stop the play and then be scolded about it afterwards. Like, replay was supposed to help these guys. Now it's made them worse because it dulls their instincts.
Right.
At least have the instinct to make a call. And then if it's corrected afterwards, it's corrected. Big deal. You got it right, move on. But you got to make the initial call.
Yeah, the Steelers were very fortunate that didn't end up mattering because they did everything right. They got the guy before he got into the end zone. They drove him back. They controlled him, but they allowed him to roll the ball to Jared Goff. It was a preposterous play and very disappointing that was technically ruled a touchdown because it should have been nothing of the sort.
Time now for Who Will Take Flight. This is where we talk about flight night at Mike's Monday Night Football. If you're a fantasy football player, oh boy, there's going to be a lot on the line here for your finals because like Kyron Williams is going to be playing, Matt Stafford is going to be playing, the Rams receivers is going to be playing, Bijan's going to be in play. Anybody offensively that you have from the Falcons, Pitts, whoever it might be. Is London back? I don't know if London's back or not, but whoever, you're going to have a lot of fantasy impact on this game if you are in the finals, as I will be rooting against all those people that I just talked about. So flight night at Mike's. Go there, get yourself a flight of their many draft beers that we talked about, again, at the base of the Clemente Bridge across from PNC Park. This is where we talk about who we think will take flight for either team. I'll start off on this one, Mike, and I'll go to the Browns side first, actually. Harold Fannin is my guy. He's been the Browns starting tight end for 5 games now with Njoku getting hurt. Over that stretch, he's led the Browns with a 31% target share. He has 3 or more receptions in 10 of his last 11 games. He leads all rookies in receptions. That uptick in his productivity kind of started in the Pittsburgh game. He really became like a primary target when Gabriel was in there, and it just kept going. So he's a guy that I'm going to say to watch that could take flight for the Steelers. And then I guess I got to go with Roman Wilson because somebody has to at wide receivers, and that's, man, did Tomlin talk him up during his press conference or what? Oh, I can't wait to see how he sharpened his sword for battle during these practice time after his usage got reduced. Like, how much more could have gotten reduced? Well, I guess we got the answer. He didn't play at all. That's how it got reduced. But, I mean, I'm not buying into Tomlin's hype. I just feel like I have to say somebody at the wide receiver position, so I'll say him.
Well, you took him, and I was going to I think I was going to mention him earlier in one of our categories. But when I noticed that you had taken, he was going to be the bonus category for me. Right. So I decided to go with Adam Thielen because you're 100% right. Somebody's and like Valdez-Scantling, we saw what he is on Sunday. That streak pattern that he breaks off the defensive back to the in. When he gets to the end zone, the ball is thrown and it's certainly reachable and it bangs off his hands. And I turned to my wife and I said, "It's who he is. I can't be mad. That's who he's been his whole career. If that's not what he did, he'd still be in KC or Minnesota or wherever, Green Bay. I mean, he wouldn't be here if he weren't that guy. So I can't be mad about him. So I also can't count on him to be the guy to take flight. Thielen, I think that they can use a lot in similar ways to the tight ends, but he has played split to the sideline before. Whether they make that change in this game, I don't know. I have a feeling they'll probably just use Wilson and up Valdez-Scantling's snaps a little bit in that wide position. But however they utilize Thielen, I think he's got a shot to make a difference in DK's absence. And for the Browns, because you took Fannin, again, good choice. I'm going to go with Jerry Jeudy. He's had some good games in the past against the Steelers. And I think that they're going to have to throw the ball successfully to beat the Steelers. I think the Steelers will be able to handle the run game. They've done that pretty successfully the last couple of weeks. So I know the Ravens got a lot of yards, but they've been able to manage the running game pretty well in recent weeks. And so I think they'll be able to do that. So it's going to have to come through the air. And I think you're right that Fannon's going to get some yards, and I think Jeudy will as well.
All right, let me give you these numbers. After Quinshon Judkins left the game last week, Raheem Sanders had 12 touches for 46 yards, and Travion Williams, 7 touches for 55 yards, if you're looking for run game options for the Browns. All right, Mike, let's get to you know what? I'm going to change things up here because this is where we go around the league. I kind of talked about the Ravens and Packers already.
Right.
And Dylan, who sent us a message earlier, followed up with one that I thought was a good talking point. And I didn't necessarily view it through this lens, but since he brought it up, I'll advance it this way. It says, AFC playoff teams you don't want the Steelers to see. Yeah, any of them. Any of them, basically, unless the Patriots are going to barf up the ball to them 5 more times. But, if you're looking at current playoff teams, all right, because I kind of got in this conversation over a Christmas dinner or Christmas Eve or something like that, talking with one of my wife's family members. We were kind of kicking around the potential matchups. I don't want to see the Bills again because I know what you just said. They've been better against the run, but I still think when the Steelers have multiple run game options is where they get gashed, and the Bills highlighted that more than anybody else.
Yeah.
I don't want to see the Texans because I think the Texans' pass rush is going to be a real weapon that's going to be a problem against the Steelers. Jacksonville, in theory, I wouldn't mind seeing, but every time we see Jacksonville in the playoffs coming to Pittsburgh, it's bad news.
Whether it's true.
Bortles or David Garrard or whoever it might be. Maybe it's the Chargers, although, the Chargers beat them soundly in LA, but I think the Steelers are a better version of themselves right now, and LA coming to Pittsburgh to play a playoff game. I don't necessarily have a lot of faith in Herbert as a playoff quarterback, even though I like him as a quarterback in theory. Maybe it's the Chargers, the current matchup that exists right now. What do you think?
It's exactly what I said when asked that question on Pompiani's show a couple of weeks ago. It just looks like that's the best matchup. Honestly, I kind of look at it like if you could get that first one, whoever it is, then you would right now theoretically play Denver in the conference semifinals. And that's like if Denver could be one of those wild card teams, which I think might be mathematically possible. I'm not sure. But if Denver were one of the wild card teams, that's who I would pick because I think their defense is excellent, but not as overwhelming as Houston's. And offensively, they are not impressive. And so that would be who I would pick if you could take the whole field. But in terms of the current wild cards, the Steelers got to Herbert 5 times in the first trip. They didn't play well offensively. That was the first Rodgers bad game. Rodgers has been much better since. I mean, if we get this Aaron Rodgers and that pass rush, I think the Steelers can, and Pittsburgh weather, throw that in like you did. I think then that says perhaps you can have some success.
Yeah. And, I put this out there about the Chargers and, full opportunity for them to make me retract that if they want by playing well over these next couple of weeks, because they've got Houston this week and then they've got Denver next week. That's why Denver still hasn't locked up the division, even though they won last night against the Chiefs, because they can if the Chargers win twice, I guess they can still win the division then at this point. And that would knock Denver down. And I
Right.
hadn't thought too much about Denver coming here, but that's a pretty good point that you make. You know, like, you want to see Bo Nix in a playoff game? Maybe, as opposed to some of those other more than Josh Allen. I do.
Oh yeah,
Even more than Herbert. I don't know. I know what C.J. Stroud did to the Steelers the one time he had a chance to play him in the regular season, and it wasn't pretty.
yes.
You know, I wouldn't mind seeing the Houston offense. Like, from that standpoint, yeah, bring that. But that defense is such a monster unto itself. And here we are talking about Garrett and what he can do alone. And they've got multiple pass rush options that I think would play very well against Pittsburgh. So I would prefer to avoid the Texans as well. But it's going to be – we're going to learn a lot more about what the Chargers can do in the playoffs, because they're going to play 2 playoff teams here in the next 2 weeks before they even get to the postseason themselves.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's my Around the League note. What did you want to bring up? You want to bring up a little bit more about the Packers?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of covered that as well because it's so important relative to the Steelers that we actually did address it in the front of the show, which was Malik Willis is now back in practice and may be available on Saturday if Jordan Love doesn't get cleared from the concussion protocol in time. And as I mentioned before, I was very impressed with how well Willis played. And I have seen, and I don't watch the Pack. I mean, I've seen them a couple of times. I saw them obviously when they played the Steelers and then this one. But I've seen people from Green Bay that are fans say that they prefer to go to Willis at this point, that they think he's even better or also is better than Jordan Love at this point. I don't know if I necessarily concur with that.
I'm not ready to go there.
Yeah, I know the concerns about Love's performance this year. We saw them reflected in their game against the Bengals and some of the games they've lost. But I think it's important for the Steelers that one of them play on Saturday night for sure.
Well, you know what? I'm really kind of baffled by this. I can't remember the last time we've seen so many playoff spots soaked up before we even get to Sunday of the second to last week of the season. Like, there's basically the one spot right now for the AFC, whoever wins the North, and then the last wild card. And those things could be determined, at least one of them, by Saturday night before Sunday even takes the field, like we've talked about. You know, everything's sewn up right now as far as who's getting in the NFC. There's some playoff positioning. And I also don't know, Mike, like, and by the way, isn't the one division that's locked up? I'm trying to look at this here. I think the only division that's locked up is the Eagles in the NFC East, right?
That sounds right to me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's the only division that's locked up. And that's kind of funny to me because they're going to be, the 3rd seed? You know, like, that's not – the division itself dictated that more than the Eagles did by running away with it.
Right. The NFC East has been surprisingly poor, especially for all those who are saying that George Pickens was the answer for Dallas. And I kept saying, are you not looking at the record? Because they're not winning any games. The NFC North, the Lions sort of busting at the end has taken some of the drama out of that. But there is still a division race there. The Panthers and the Buccaneers trying to prove who can be one of the worst division champions in recent memory. It's been that way throughout the league, and I will be interested to see what it'll be like if the Steelers are in the position Sunday afternoon of having already clinched. I'd very much like to see that, obviously. But I'll be fascinated, too, to see how those next 2 weeks unfold if that's the case.
And, on the AFC side, with likely no Lamar Jackson, with definitely no Patrick Mahomes, and with Buffalo probably being a wild card, like, the seeding aspect to me doesn't feel like it means as much as it has in recent years.
I think that's fair.
Brackets are more open than what they
Yes.
have been in recent years.
Oh, no question. It was all, as we saw when the Steelers went to Kansas City in 2021 and were non-competitive, even though they were staked to a sack fumble touchdown, a strip sack TD at the very early stages by by TJ, and then they go to Buffalo a couple of years later, and Mason Rudolph's playing hot, but can't succeed up there. Those teams were really difficult to defeat. This is not that year, and that doesn't mean that the Steelers can't go out there and play the same games they played in those. I don't know, but it's not like that. This is as wide open as it's been, and I think as much as people have tried to make it that the Rams are one. You're looking for a team like that, the Rams. Well, the Rams went out a couple of Mondays ago and lost a vital game to the Seahawks. So
yeah, their defense could be brought into question, I think.
I'm sorry. Yeah. And so I don't think there's anybody in the NFL that anybody looks at and says that anybody that's in the playoff hunt or in the, that's already clinched the spot that can look and say, oh man, I don't want to play them. Yeah. I mean, there may be preferences, but there's nobody out there that you just say, gosh, just don't give me them.
Yeah, you might not want to see the Rams more than you see Darnold in the playoffs, but do you want to go to Seattle as opposed to having the Rams come to you if you're from Philadelphia or Chicago, for instance,
right.
Just thinking off the top of my head, if you're projecting out to the championship round. All right, let's get to a couple of comments here before we get to our predictions. We've gotten to one or two already. Peach says win and what all the other teams do is meaningless. Well, we established that, but, it could be meaningless for the Steelers. They don't even have to do the winning part if Green Bay takes care of business on Saturday. That was sort of the part of the whole conversation. I get it. I get your theory. Just take care of your own business. That's what Tomlin was trying to underscore when he took the podium on Tuesday. But, I mean, the fact that he tried to get us to believe that he didn't even know the Green Bay-Baltimore game was on Saturday night by the time it was Tuesday was just comical. Like, that was almost the great Mike, you're overselling this. You don't know that? Like, John Q. Yinzer on Grant Street knew that. What are we talking about here? Let's get to one other guy. P-Town says 11-6 was my prediction before the start of the season. Well, bully for you because you were a hell of a lot more optimistic than I was. And I still, I'm going to, if they get to that point, I might, be doing this at the end of the day and looking at those standings and saying, how do they do that? Especially with the fact, like we talked about before, upon further review, the teams that they did play that were playoff teams that beat them are sort of surprising. And the one playoff team that they did beat, meaning at, likelihood the Patriots, you have to go back. I want to go back and watch that game eventually. If they have to,
you don't really. It was really bad.
How do they get those 5 turnovers and get them where they got them to win that football game?
Every one of those turnovers was as legit as they come. There was real effort.
The ball loose. Yeah, they made picks. Exactly. I got you.
But the rest of the performance was tragic. I mean, that was when you were starting to think the Steelers were not going to be any good at all because they played so poorly. But they won, so you move forward. And then I think the tide for the Steelers started to turn when they went out and defeated Indianapolis in the way that they did. And then it started to be, well, maybe they could be better than they have suggested themselves, because at that point they were really struggling to stop the run. They were really struggling to contain third down passes, the third down passes that New England completed so easily, and then Cincinnati followed up on and did the same thing to them. There were lots of concerns along the way, but they have gradually become a much more complete football team as we sit here today. Than they were a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
I'll get to one more before we get to our predictions. Chris, if you could skip ahead to Jim's email here. Jim says, precedent doesn't seem to matter when it comes to NFL jurisprudence. Shouldn't the Steelers and the NFL Players Union send these videos to the NFL and demand the penalties be dropped until a specific policy is in place? Look, I understand the theory that you're getting at here, that, they kind of rewrote the rules for the DK situation. But you know what? If the NFL feels like this stuff is getting out of control with players and fans interacting, they have a right to set a new precedent, and I said the same thing that you did. It felt like 2 games was significant to me because of the Shaq Lawson situation. Forget the Lamar thing. That's a straw man to me. Like that's a silly comp to make because the guy reached into the field of play and bopped Lamar in the head, and Lamar shoved him off of him. Like, that's not a comp to make.
Right.
The Shaq Lawson thing 2 years ago is. against Philadelphia. It was a very similar type of situation. And he only got fined or didn't even get fined, maybe even now that I think back to it. He didn't get suspended, and
Right.
DK got 2. But if what the NFL is saying is this is such an egregious point, this one got so much attention, and we want to snuff this out before it becomes a problem, well, guess what, DK? You just set your own precedent. They broke precedent for Ben way back in the day, too, when they suspended him in 2010.
Right.
So, they have shown that they have a right to do this. And to a certain extent, I don't blame them for it. I just thought that the new precedent could be set that you will get suspended if you do this, since Lawson didn't even get fined. So
Right.
I thought the second game was a little much. That's all.
That's exactly how I feel. I thought the 2 games was in place, honestly, simply so they could reduce it to 1 and then go forward. So I was shocked when the appeal produced no change at all. But again, this is something, even if, that fan's voice carries into the field of play, yes. So does every fan who boos. And if you're going to be, and even if his offense went beyond that, and I have no idea what he said, you have a repercussion as a player to go through the process of dealing with it through your team personnel and the opposing stadium security, so that gets taken care of and you don't have to deal with it. And you dealing it with yourself is the worst possible decision. Not a defense of the person who did this, because I don't have any, I buy tickets to games and stuff, and I have no use for anybody who behaves like that. I haven't observed a lot of it, but if I did, that's not what I'm going to games for. I'm going to be entertained, not so this fan can show how cool he is.
Let's get to our predictions quickly here, Mike, to wrap up. I've got Steelers 26-17. Might be a little high scoring on my part, but I'll go 26-17. My prop is not going to be a player prop. It's going to be a team prop. I've got the Steelers winning the first half at -118. I think they've had a lead in every game so far this season, the Steelers. And they've gone 11 games in a row against the Browns. I'm talking about here. The Browns, 11 games in a row against winning teams where they've lost the first half. So that's a trend to keep in mind. So I'll bet the Steelers in the first half of this one.
Yeah, I'm still on a roll with my not picking the Steelers thing, so I am not messing with that mojo. I think that I've predicted them to lose 3 weeks in a row, and they've won 3 weeks in a row, so I'm sticking with that. So, if you're a loyal fan of the show, by now not to take this seriously. Browns 22, Steelers 17, but you should probably take the prop seriously. I mean, I don't know how seriously. I wouldn't take it that seriously, but my props have been pretty good. A week ago, A-Rod blew away his pass yards number. I got that one right. And this week, I'm going to say Shadur Sanders goes over 177.5 passing yards. I just don't think they can be competitive without that. I'll be shocked if they could be competitive without him passing that number. And I'm not saying they'll be competitive, but I think they'll at least be in the game. And again, it comes down, I'm saying that now. I will say this: if I were betting on this game, I wouldn't make any bets until I knew what happened on Saturday night.
Yeah. Maybe until inactives come out. I wouldn't do anything until the inactive list comes out. So, Well, Mike, Merry Christmas. Thanks a lot for checking in. Hope you had a great holiday. And I'll say the same thing to all of our viewers, listeners as well. And we'll come at you again before the Ravens game for all the marbles or none of the marbles coming up on Friday of next week. I'll be in Boston, but I'll be doing the show from somewhere on Beacon Hill, I guess, Mike,
Nice.
for you and I and for people who are watching. But until then, have a good New Year, everybody, and we'll see you in the New Year as we get set for Baltimore and Pittsburgh. This is the Friday Football Show brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar on the North Side.